The roar hit the virtual boardroom hard enough to distort 12 executive microphones at once. Silas Vele had been speaking through clenched teeth when the change began. One moment, he was seated behind a black glass desk at the top of Vele Quantum Systems, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stretched across the shoulders of his 6'4" frame. The next, his pupils vanished inside a blaze of molten gold. Every face on the wall-sized conference display froze. Silas gripped the edge of the desk. The reinforced glass cracked beneath his fingers. "Mr. Vele?" one director whispered. His teeth lengthened. Not slowly, not subtly. Sharp white fangs pushed past his lips as thick reddish fur erupted along his jawline, spreading toward his cheekbones in violent waves. His expensive collar tore as the muscles in his neck expanded. A low, animal growl vibrated through the room. The board members stared through their webcams. Silas stared back. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then a director in the upper left window screamed. The sound broke what remained of Silas's control. He threw back his head and released a bone-chilling roar that rattled the windows of the executive floor, overloaded the meeting's audio compressor, and sent 3 remote participants diving beneath their desks. His chief financial officer disconnected. The legal director appeared to faint. A security executive tried to mute Silas and accidentally activated live captions. The automated transcript produced the words "prolonged hostile animal noise." Silas slammed one massive hand into the webcam. The device exploded. The meeting feed went black. Silence descended across the executive suite, interrupted only by the soft patter of broken plastic landing on the floor. Silas remained behind the desk, breathing hard. His hands were half claws. Gold still burned in his eyes. Reddish fur covered the lower half of his face like the beginning of a monstrous beard. Behind him, the office doors opened. His executive assistant, Mara Voss, stepped inside with 2 members of the internal crisis team. All 3 stopped when they saw him. Silas turned his head. "Tell me the recording was disabled." Mara swallowed. "It was supposed to be." "Supposed to be?" The collaborative meeting system generated a temporary cloud archive. Silas's claws dug deeper into the desk. "Destroy it." "We tried." The fur along his jaw bristled. Mara held up a tablet with both hands, as if presenting tribute to an angry god. The archive automatically replicated across 3 regional storage vaults. One of the board members downloaded a local copy before disconnecting. Another participant's personal assistant forwarded a screen capture to an external communications consultant. "How many people have seen it?" 27 confirmed. Silas stood. The crisis team took one synchronized step backward. He was devastatingly handsome, even while partially transformed, which somehow made the sight more frightening. His dark red hair had fallen over his forehead. His broad chest strained against his shirt. The gold in his eyes promised a level of violence that no human corporate policy had been designed to address. 27 people, he repeated. "So far." A growl rolled from his throat. Mara corrected herself immediately. "Exactly 27. We are maintaining that number through aggressive containment." One of the crisis analysts raised a shaking hand. "We have a possible solution." Silas looked at him. The analyst lowered his hand. Mara took over. "We upload the footage to a private collaborative video team space. We present it as a deepfake contamination event. Then we hire the best freelance editor in Neoncrest City to remove every visible anomaly." Silas glanced at the ruined webcam. "You want a human editor to alter evidence of my transformation?" "Yes. A stranger. A heavily vetted stranger. A stranger who will watch me shift." Mara's expression tightened. "The alternative is allowing the unedited footage to circulate until someone posts it publicly." The gold in Silas's eyes brightened. "Offer a bounty," he said. "An obscene one." "How obscene?" "Large enough that the editor asks no questions." 32 minutes later, a restricted project appeared inside an encrypted collaborative team space used by elite post-production specialists throughout Neoncrest City. The project title was simple: Executive deepfake removal. Immediate delivery required. The listed bounty was large enough to purchase a luxury apartment in the city's Central Tower district. The attached note claimed that a hostile competitor had inserted fabricated animal features into a confidential board meeting. The chosen editor would need to remove the visual manipulation, restore the executive's face, repair the audio, and provide a clean corporate version before midnight. Mara invited 6 candidates. 4 rejected the job after viewing the first 5 seconds. 1 demanded hazard pay despite working remotely. The 6th candidate opened the file while eating noodles from a paper container. Zoe Mercer sat barefoot in a chair that cost more than her kitchen table, surrounded by 5 monitors, 3 discarded coffee cups, 2 humming render units, and a narrow jungle of cooling cables. At 24, she had already built a reputation for fixing footage that larger production studios considered impossible. She restored corrupted commercials, rebuilt missing facial performances, removed unwanted objects from live broadcasts, and made executives sound coherent after they had delivered speeches with the emotional range of malfunctioning elevators. Her long, pale blonde hair was twisted into a loose knot, held in place by a graphics stylus. A black tank top revealed smooth shoulders and the toned arms of someone who survived deadlines through caffeine and stubbornness. Sharp blue eyes studied the project brief. Then she studied the bounty. Then she opened the footage. Silas appeared on her central monitor. Zoe paused. Even through compressed video, he looked less like a technology executive and more like someone hired to break technology executives in half. He had a severe, aristocratic face, a powerful jaw, and shoulders so broad the webcam framing barely contained them. "Compensating for something," Zoe murmured. She pressed play. Silas's eyes turned gold. Fangs emerged. Reddish fur spread over his jaw. He roared. The camera died. Zoe stared at the frozen frame. Then she took another bite of noodles. "That is embarrassing." She replayed the transformation at quarter speed. The fur growth looked disturbingly organic. The eye illumination reflected across the polished desk. The fangs altered the shape of his lips. Even the expansion in his neck affected the fall of his collar. Whoever had created the supposed deepfake understood anatomy, light transport, skin deformation, lens distortion, and physical interaction at a professional level. Unfortunately, they had also chosen reddish fur. Zoe leaned closer. Why does the terrifying CEO turn into an angry farm dog? She created a new project folder. Red, puppy, error, v1.mp4. Then she began working. At Vele Quantum Systems, Silas had fully returned to human form. He stood inside a concealed operations chamber beneath the executive floor, surrounded by 6 werewolf enforcers wearing dark tactical clothing. Every man in the room was armed. Every screen displayed Zoe's anonymous freelancer profile and the progress status of the uploaded footage. Silas watched the percentage climb. 12%. 15. 19. "She accepted too quickly," said Garrick, his chief enforcer. Silas folded his arms. "She wants the money. Or she recognized what you are. No human would." Garrick studied the project activity log. She downloaded the footage, created local proxies, isolated your face, and began something called anatomical stabilization. Silas's expression hardened. "What does that mean?" No one answered. The youngest enforcer quietly searched the phrase on his tablet. "It appears to mean she is forcing your face to remain human." The room went still. Silas turned toward him. "Through technology?" The enforcer looked uncertain. "Allegedly." Silas watched the progress climb to 26%. The curse that afflicted him had resisted blood rites, lunar restraints, sedatives, silver binding circles, and 3 generations of supernatural physicians. Yet somewhere in Neoncrest City, a human woman was apparently forcing his transformation out of existence 1 frame at a time. His instincts rejected the possibility. His paranoia embraced it. "She may be a sorcerer," Garrick said. "There are no registered illusion sorcerers in the city." A competent sorcerer would not register. Silas stared at Zoe's blank profile icon. Find her. Meanwhile, Zoe placed 64 tracking points across Silas's face. She anchored the primary stabilization map to his nose bridge, cheekbones, ears, and jaw hinge. The glowing eyes were easy. She sampled his natural iris color from earlier frames, reconstructed the missing pupils, reduced the unnatural luminance spill, and corrected the reflections on the desk. The fangs were more irritating. They had altered the shadow inside his mouth. Zoe built a clean dental reconstruction from 3 pre-transformation frames, warped it to match his speech pattern, and inserted motion-aware occlusion around his lower lip. She worked without urgency. To her, panic was simply poor file management with louder breathing. The fur required a different approach. Automated object removal produced smearing along Silas's jaw, so Zoe abandoned it and constructed a clean-shaven facial patch from unaffected skin regions. She generated a dynamic texture map, matched the pores, restored beard shadow, and tracked the result through every violent movement. Silas's roar played repeatedly through her speakers. The sound shook an empty cup off her desk. Zoe caught it without looking. Overacting! She isolated the vocal track. The roar contained frequencies below the expected range of human speech. It also carried a strange harmonic distortion that caused her waveform analyzer to issue a clipping warning, despite the source remaining technically within range. She frowned. That is annoyingly good sound design. She opened an advanced AI voice generator and fed it samples of Silas speaking before the transformation. The system built a vocal model from 43 seconds of clean dialogue. Zoe typed a replacement line. My apologies. I appear to be experiencing a temporary connection issue. Please continue the quarterly review without me. She generated the sentence. Silas's recreated voice delivered it with icy corporate authority. Zoe listened twice. Too sincere. She adjusted the emotional setting to restrained irritation. The second version sounded exactly like a billionaire blaming the internet for a personal failure. Perfect. Back inside the hidden operations chamber, the enforcers watched her progress in growing horror. She has removed the Alpha's eyes, one whispered. Restored them, another corrected. She replaced his teeth. She is altering his voice now. Garrick looked at Silas. No ordinary human should be able to manipulate the image of an Alpha this precisely. Silas's jaw flexed. On screen, the status changed. Audio regeneration complete. A preview file appeared. Mara opened it. The virtual board meeting began. Silas listened to his recorded self discuss declining infrastructure costs. He saw the exact moment when the curse should have surfaced. Nothing happened. His eyes remained dark, his teeth remained human, his face remained clean and controlled. The violent transformation had vanished so completely that even he questioned whether it had occurred. Then came the moment of the roar. The edited Silas merely looked toward the camera and said, My apologies. I appear to be experiencing a temporary connection issue. Please continue the quarterly review without me. The feed ended with a tasteful digital freeze rather than a smashed device. No fur, no fangs, no evidence. Garrick stepped closer to the screen. She erased your beast. Silas felt cold pressure settle beneath his ribs. Werewolves could be hidden by magic, but the process required proximity, ritual preparation, and direct contact with the subject's aura. Zoe Mercer had done it remotely while showing no sign of strain. Worse, she had done it in less than 2 hours. Mara exhaled in relief. The edit is flawless. No, Silas said. Everyone looked at him. It is impossible! His gaze moved to the file name displayed in the activity log. Red? Puppy? Error. V1 on MP4. The room became dangerously quiet. Garrick read it again. Red puppy? A low growl formed in Silas's chest. She had witnessed the hidden Alpha King of Neoncrest City lose control. She had seen the face that terrified rival packs and forced ancient syndicate leaders to their knees. Then she had labeled him a puppy. Mara cleared her throat. Her naming conventions may be informal. Silas picked up a compact pistol loaded with silver-jacketed rounds. The enforcers immediately reached for their own weapons. Mara stared at him. What are you doing? Containing the threat. She just saved the company. She altered supernatural evidence without ritual tools, physical access, or visible spell work. She used editing software. Silas slid the weapon beneath his jacket. That is what she wants us to believe. Across the city, Zoe uploaded the final file, submitted her invoice, and leaned back in her chair. A message appeared from the anonymous client. How did you remove the transformation? Zoe typed her answer. Basic facial tracking, texture reconstruction, motion-aware cleanup, iris replacement, dental patching, and AI voice synthesis. The reply arrived almost instantly. Basic? Zoe smiled faintly. For me. Inside the operations chamber, Silas read the 2 words. For me. Not denial, not confusion, a declaration of power. Garrick's face darkened. She is taunting you. Silas looked at the address his intelligence team had just uncovered. Zoe Mercer lived and worked from a converted industrial loft above a closed animation theater in the Eastern District. No registered magic. No pack affiliation. No known supernatural relatives. That only made her more suspicious. Prepare the vehicles, he ordered. 6 enforcers moved at once. Silas buttoned his suit jacket over the weapon. His eyes remained human, but a thin ring of gold had begun to form around his pupils. He would find the woman who had erased his beast. He would determine what she was. And if Zoe Mercer truly possessed the power to expose or control him, he would eliminate her before sunrise. At that exact moment, Zoe reopened the finished project because she had noticed a minor skin tone mismatch beneath Silas's left ear. She corrected it in 11 seconds. Then she renamed the file Red, Puppy, Error, Final, V2.mp4, and went to make coffee, completely unaware that the most lethal werewolf in Neoncrest City was already on his way to kill her. At that exact moment, Zoe reopened the finished project because she had noticed a minor skin tone mismatch beneath Silas's left ear. She corrected it in 11 seconds. Then she renamed the file Red, Puppy, Error, Final, V2.mp4, and went to make coffee, completely unaware that the most lethal werewolf in Neoncrest City was already on his way to kill her. 3 armored vehicles stopped outside the converted animation theater without headlights. Silas emerged first. The Eastern District was nearly silent at that hour, its narrow towers glowing with old neon signs and security lamps. Rain had darkened the pavement. Steam curled from ventilation grates along the abandoned theater's exterior wall. 6 enforcers spread out behind him. Garrick checked the upper windows. No visible guards! She does not need guards, Silas said. He could feel the curse stirring beneath his skin. The closer he came to the building, the more violently his instincts reacted. It was not fear. An Alpha King did not fear an unidentified sorcerer living above a failed animation theater. It was anticipation. At least, that was what he told himself. The security entrance was protected by an electronic lock, a biometric scanner, 2 reinforced deadbolts, and a steel internal frame. Garrick removed a compact bypass device. Silas walked past him. Alpha, the door is reinforced. Silas kicked it once. The entire steel assembly tore free from the wall and crashed across the studio floor. A siren chirped for half a second, reconsidered its purpose, and died. Silas stepped through the ruined doorway with his claws extended. Gold burned through his eyes. Thick reddish fur had begun to form along his jaw, and lethal alpha energy rolled ahead of him in an invisible wave. It was the same force that had made rival pack leaders kneel without being ordered. The same force that had once driven 12 armed syndicate soldiers out of a fortified chamber before he threw a single punch. His enforcers entered behind him with weapons raised. They expected defensive magic. They expected illusions. They expected fire, blood, or creatures summoned from whatever forbidden realm had taught Zoe Mercer to erase an alpha's transformation. Instead, they found a woman wearing enormous noise-canceling headphones. Zoe sat at her multi-monitor workstation with one bare foot tucked beneath her thigh. Her pale blonde hair was still held up by a graphic stylus. A dark, cropped shirt exposed a narrow strip of smooth skin above loose gray pants. She did not look toward the broken entrance. She did not react to the armed men. She did not appear to notice that Silas Vale, half-shifted and radiating enough supernatural violence to terrify a building full of predators, was standing 20 feet behind her. Her attention remained fixed on a cloud observability dashboard covering 3 monitors. Colored graphs rose and fell across the displays. Automated API ingestion requests streamed through regional queues. Render nodes appeared as hundreds of pulsing indicators, arranged by temperature, workload, and error rate. A warning flashed. Cooling Cluster 7 had exceeded its preferred thermal threshold. Zoe leaned forward and typed. Silas stared at her. "Why is she not moving?" One enforcer whispered. "Perhaps she is preparing a spell," another replied. Zoe adjusted the priority of 12 rendering jobs, shifted an ingestion pipeline to a secondary region, and restarted an unstable container. Silas advanced. Each step should have been audible. His shoes crushed fragments of the doorway. His claws scraped against the edge of a metal table. The growl in his chest was deep enough to vibrate the glass in a nearby cabinet. Zoe kept watching her dashboard. Silas stopped directly behind her chair. "Zoe Mercer!" No response. His jaw tightened. "Zoe Mercer!" She clicked through a thermal map of the render farm. Garrett glanced between them. No one had ignored Silas twice and remained alive long enough to attempt it a third time. Silas leaned closer. "You will remove those devices and face me." Zoe dragged an ingestion job from one queue to another. Silas raised a clawed hand. The closest enforcer quietly stepped backward, unwilling to witness what followed. Silas tapped one padded ear cup with the point of a claw. Zoe flinched. She spun in her chair, pulled off the headphones, and glared at him. "What?" The room went silent. Silas had expected terror. He had expected recognition, defensive magic, or at minimum a startled scream. Zoe looked irritated. Her sharp blue eyes moved over his glowing gold irises, extended fangs, clawed hands, and fur-covered jaw. Her gaze lingered on the massive shape of his shoulders beneath the charcoal suit. Then she frowned critically. Silas allowed the full pressure of his alpha presence to descend upon her. "You know why I am here." Zoe tilted her head. "Did the client send you?" Silas's claws flexed. "I am the client." She looked at the reddish fur along his face. Then she looked at the restored human version of him on one of her monitors. "Oh!" Garrick tightened his grip on his weapon. Zoe pointed at Silas's jaw. "That looks worse in person." For several seconds, Silas could not process the sentence. "What?" "The makeup." He stared at her. Zoe stood and stepped closer. The top of her head barely reached his shoulder, but she examined him with the calm concentration of a technician inspecting defective equipment. "Your practical effects department has no idea how mammalian fur works," she said. "The growth direction is inconsistent around the mandible. The density is too uniform, and there is almost no natural shedding." One of the enforcers lowered his weapon slightly. Silas's voice dropped. "You believe this is makeup?" Zoe reached toward his face. Every enforcer raised his weapon. Silas caught her wrist before her fingers touched the fur. His hand closed completely around the delicate joint. Zoe looked down at his claws, then up at his face. "Careful! Those prosthetics are sharper than they look." Silas could hear her heartbeat. It was steady, no acceleration, no scent of fear, no trace of magic. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, and the clean fragrance of coffee, cool electronics, and something faintly sweet reached him through the sterile air. His wolf went still, not calm, attentive. Silas released her wrist slowly. Zoe rubbed it once. "Also, you kicked down a pressure-sealed door. It was blocking my entrance. It was supposed to. You attempted to keep me out. I was attempting to keep hot air out." Zoe pointed past him. Silas turned. The broken doorway now opened directly into the stairwell. Warm, damp air from outside was flowing into the climate-controlled studio. Zoe looked at the dashboard. The cooling cluster warning had changed from amber to red. Her expression sharpened with genuine alarm for the first time. "You are ruining the airflow." Silas turned back to her. I came here to determine whether you are a threat to my existence. And I need you to close the door. I destroyed it. I noticed. Her gaze moved to Garrick. You! Large tactical man. Pick it up. Garrick looked at Silas. Silas looked at Zoe. Zoe pointed toward the steel slab lying across the floor. My servers are pulling in humid air. Unless your costume department also covers hardware replacement, move the door back into the frame. Garrick's lips parted. No human had ever assigned him maintenance work during an armed intrusion. Silas spoke carefully. Do you understand who stands before you? A client who broke into my studio after approving a rush delivery. I approved nothing. Your team downloaded the final file. They did so to examine your methods. You mean quality assurance. I mean investigation. Then you owe me an additional consulting fee. Silas's thoughts stopped moving in a coherent sequence. He had entered prepared to kill a supernatural enemy. He had imagined illusion barriers, enchanted weapons, perhaps a violent duel that would destroy half the block. Instead, Zoe Mercer was attempting to invoice him. Behind him, cooling fans increased speed. The sound filled the room. Zoe winced. Great! Now the farm is compensating. Silas stepped into her path as she moved toward the dashboard. You will answer my questions. I will answer a support ticket. This is not a support ticket. Then it needs to be. His growl deepened. Do not trivialize me. I am not trivializing you. I am categorizing the request. I am Silas Vale. Yes! Red puppy! The enforcers froze. Silas's golden eyes widened. Zoe seemed not to notice the sudden drop in temperature. You named me that. I named the error that. You described my true form as a puppy. I described your visual artifact as a puppy. It was not an artifact. Then your actor needs medical attention. I am not an actor. Founder Vanity Project? I rule every werewolf syndicate in Neoncrest City. Zoe stared at him. Silas waited. At last, her expression changed. Not into fear, into mild disappointment. So this is immersive marketing. Garrick made a strangled sound. Silas leaned down until his face was inches from hers. I could tear this building apart with my hands. You already started. I could break every bone in your body before your guards arrived. I do not have guards. I know. That is an unsettling thing to admit. His fangs sharpened. You should be terrified. Zoe's gaze traveled across his fur again. Your shedding is still wrong. Silas's brain short-circuited. He had threatened her life. He had revealed the existence of werewolf syndicates. He had shown her claws capable of ripping through reinforced steel. She was evaluating follicle behavior. Zoe gestured toward his jaw. Real fur does not sit that cleanly during aggressive facial movement. You would have loose strands around the collar and more secondary motion near the cheeks. Also, the transition edge near your left ear is bad. Silas slowly touched the spot she had corrected in the video. That is where you altered my image. Yes, because your effects team failed to maintain skin continuity. You reconstructed my face. I patched a texture. You replaced my eyes. I tracked the original irises. You removed my fangs. Dental cleanup. You silenced my roar. Audio replacement. You erased the beast. Zoe sighed. I fixed a file. The simplicity of it struck him harder than any magic could have. He released his alpha pressure. Nothing changed. Zoe had not been resisting it. She had not even recognized it. Silas inhaled carefully. No magic, no supernatural blood, no concealed enchantment. She was human. Entirely, impossibly human. The transformation footage had not frightened her because she had never believed it was real. What his enforcers had interpreted as forbidden sorcery was simply technical skill, operating at a level none of them understood. Silas looked toward the monitors. Hundreds of automated tasks crossed the dashboard in real time. Zoe's render farm spanned remote infrastructure throughout the city, ingesting, processing, and delivering visual data at extraordinary speed. You command all of this? I maintain it. You built the system? Most of it. Alone? Contractors kept writing unstable ingestion scripts, so mostly alone. The gold began fading from Silas's eyes. His claws retracted. The fur along his jaw withdrew beneath his skin, revealing the severe, handsome face Zoe had reconstructed frame by frame. She watched the process. Her cool expression finally broke. Silas felt a surge of satisfaction. Recognition at last. Zoe stepped closer and inspected his smooth jaw. That transition was much better. Silas stared at her. No seam, she continued. No visible adhesive failure. You should have done that on camera. It was real. Of course. You just watched it disappear. Adaptive prosthetics. Nanofiber skin? No. Real-time projection layer? No. Zoe crossed her arms. Then explain it in a way that does not sound like promotional fiction. I am a werewolf. She glanced at Garrick and the armed enforcers. Are they werewolves too? Yes. Is this a union thing? Garrick turned his face away to hide a reaction dangerously close to laughter. Silas heard it anyway. He should have been furious. Instead, his attention remained fixed on Zoe. Her beauty had been apparent in the intelligence file. In person, it was distracting. She possessed a sharp, effortless sensuality that required no performance. But it was her fearlessness that held him. She had looked directly into the face of a predator and found technical flaws. The wolf beneath his skin did not want to silence her. It wanted to hear what she would say next. Zoe checked the dashboard again. The server temperatures continued climbing. She pointed at the destroyed door. This conversation can continue after someone fixes that. Silas turned to Garrick. Replace it. Garrick blinked. Now? Now! We came to eliminate a supernatural threat. There is no supernatural threat. Zoe raised a finger. There is a thermal threat. Silas looked at the enforcers. Seal the entrance. Restore the airflow. Do not damage anything else. 6 lethal werewolves lowered their weapons and went to repair a door. Zoe returned to her chair. Silas followed. She sat. He remained beside her, towering over the workstation. For the first time in years, he did not know how to proceed. He understood conquest, intimidation, mergers, territorial wars, and hostile acquisitions. He did not understand a woman who treated a death squad as emergency facilities staff. He cleared his throat. Zoe clicked through her cloud dashboard. Still here? Yes. Do you need another edit? Silas watched the reflected graphs move across her blue eyes. Do you accept exclusive monthly retainers? Her hand stopped on the mouse. Behind them, Garrick nearly dropped the steel door. Zoe looked up. For what scope? Any scope I require. That is not a scope. Visual containment, audio reconstruction, live feed correction, removal of any future evidence. Evidence of the werewolf marketing campaign? Evidence of my transformations. She studied him for a moment. Silas felt a strange pressure in his chest. It was not the curse, it was the need for her to say yes. Zoe turned back to her monitor. My exclusive rate is high. I own 3 cloud infrastructure networks. That does not answer the rate question. Name your price. She opened a new billing document. I also need guaranteed priority access to your distributed rendering capacity. Done. And an independent security audit of your ingestion endpoints. Done. And your people stop entering through load-bearing structures. Silas glanced at the enforcers struggling to wedge the door into place. Done. Zoe typed for several seconds. Then she sent him a contract. Silas's phone vibrated. He looked at the document but did not read it. His attention stayed on her face. You are not afraid of me, he said. You are currently standing between me and the temperature display. He moved aside automatically. Zoe checked the cooling graph. The warning dropped from red to amber. She relaxed. Silas watched that tiny change move through her body. The easing of her shoulders. The soft exhale. The way one loose strand of blonde hair rested against her cheek. His wolf pressed closer to the surface. Not with aggression, with fascination. She had no magic, no supernatural defenses, no knowledge of the hidden world. Yet she had dismantled his rage with technical criticism, ordered his enforcers to perform repairs, and negotiated infrastructure access while he was still deciding whether to kill her. Silas signed the contract without reading a single clause. Zoe glanced at the confirmation. Quote, "Fastest client approval I have ever received." Silas leaned one hand against her desk. "You will work only for me. That is what exclusive means. You will remain available at all hours. That requires an emergency surcharge. Charge it. You will not distribute the original footage. I already deleted my local source copy after delivery." He stiffened. "You deleted it?" "Yes." "Permanently?" "Yes." "You retained no leverage." Zoe looked genuinely confused. "Why would I need leverage?" "You paid the invoice." Something inside Silas shifted. Everyone in his world wanted leverage. Pack leaders collected secrets. Executives stored incriminating records. Allies prepared betrayals before agreements were signed. Zoe had possessed proof that could destroy his empire. She had erased it because the job was complete. Silas straightened. His murderous rage had vanished so completely it felt absurd that he had ever brought a weapon. What replaced it was more dangerous. Interest sharpened into fascination. Fascination tightened into possession. Zoe placed her headphones over her ears again. The conversation, apparently, was over. Silas stood beside her for another 5 seconds. Then 10. She did not look up. Garrick approached cautiously. "Alpha, the entrance is temporarily sealed." Silas continued watching Zoe work. "Arrange a permanent replacement. We can return tomorrow." "No. Tonight." Zoe pointed toward a smaller monitor without removing her headphones. A typed message appeared on screen. "And use a proper thermal seal." Silas read it. Then, against all logic, the ruthless Alpha King of Neoncrest City smiled. It was a slow, rare, dangerously handsome smile that made every enforcer in the room more nervous than his claws had. "Use a proper thermal seal," he ordered. Garrick nodded. Silas looked down at Zoe once more. He had come to eliminate a sorcerer. Instead, he had found a human woman capable of editing reality, dismissing death threats, and making the most powerful predators in the city worry about server airflow. He no longer wanted her dead. He wanted her under contract. Close, protected, available. And although he did not yet understand the feral certainty taking root beneath his ribs, one truth had already become impossible to deny. Silas Vale had found the first human in Neoncrest City who was not afraid of his beast. Now he was becoming dangerously afraid that he would never be able to leave her alone. Now he was becoming dangerously afraid that he would never be able to leave her alone. A month later, Silas stood beneath the white blaze of 1,000 stage lights, while 11 million people watched him smile. The expression felt unnatural. Zoe had informed him that his normal face suggested he was preparing to execute the audience. She had then displayed 6 archived keynote recordings as evidence. Silas had responded by placing her on a permanent executive retainer, granting her unrestricted access to the company's broadcast infrastructure, and ordering the communications department to follow every instruction she gave without argument. The communications director had objected once. Zoe had shown him a graph proving that his video pipeline added 78 milliseconds of unnecessary latency. He had not objected again. Now she sat backstage in a dark technical control room, one boot resting against the edge of a console, surrounded by monitors showing every angle of the global keynote. Silas filled the central screen. He wore a black suit cut closely over his massive frame, with no tie and the top button of his shirt left open. The minimalist stage behind him stretched across the vast auditorium like a sheet of polished midnight. Thin lines of blue light moved beneath the floor, converging around a sleek pedestal at center stage. On that pedestal rested the company's newest product, the Aether Node. A compact adaptive computing unit designed to process visual environments, live simulations, and distributed automation at unprecedented speed. Zoe had advised them not to call it revolutionary. Every technology company called everything revolutionary. She had replaced the word with aggressively useful. Silas had stared at her for several seconds before approving it. Now he faced thousands of invited guests inside the auditorium and millions more through the global stream. For years, he said, his voice smooth and controlled, The industry has asked users to adapt to machines. Behind him, the screen displayed a shifting digital city. The Aether node reverses that relationship. Applause rolled through the hall. Backstage, Zoe watched 6 dashboards at once: main broadcast health, regional relay status, audio synchronization, audience engagement, thermal processing load, security anomalies. The graphs were stable, too stable, in her opinion. Large events rarely behaved well. Someone always misconfigured a relay, routed an uncompressed feed through a narrow node, or decided to install a mandatory update 3 minutes before launch. Zoe distrusted smooth operations. Smooth operations usually meant the failure had not announced itself yet. She lifted a silver energy drink from the console and took a sip. On stage, Silas raised one hand. The digital city behind him responded. Buildings unfolded into transparent layers. Traffic systems, power grids, communication networks, and security pathways appeared as luminous structures suspended around him. The audience leaned forward. Silas spoke with quiet authority. Zoe had learned that his voice changed when he addressed a crowd. It lost none of its menace, but the menace became refined. Controlled. The voice of a man who could destroy an entire industry and make the industry thank him for the opportunity. She also knew the precise point when his left eyebrow would tighten if he disliked a teleprompter line. There. Zoe glanced at the script. The communications department had reinserted the phrase transformational ecosystem after she had deleted it. She opened the private stage channel. "Skip the next sentence," she said into his earpiece. Silas did not pause. He abandoned the approved line and continued naturally. "Most technology promises possibility," he said. "This system delivers capacity." Zoe nodded. "Better." A technician beside her stared. "You give him live notes during the keynote?" "He pays for live notes." "He is terrifying." "He is less terrifying when people stop writing nonsense for him." On stage, Silas heard every word. His mouth almost curved. Then a strange scent reached him. Faint, metallic, sweet beneath the sterile auditorium air. His smile vanished. Deep inside his chest, the wolf lifted its head. Silas continued speaking. The system learns operational patterns without surrendering user control. The scent strengthened. His pulse struck hard against his throat. He scanned the front rows without turning his head. Executives, investors, government representatives from fictional states, media delegates, PAC emissaries disguised as corporate guests. At the far side of the auditorium, beneath a private balcony, a tall man in a silver suit watched Silas with cold satisfaction. Cassian Rourke, alpha of the Iron Veil Syndicate. Silas understood immediately. The ventilation system. The scent was not natural rage pheromone. Natural pheromones would have affected every werewolf in the auditorium. This compound was synthetic, engineered and calibrated specifically to exploit the curse in Silas's blood. His fingers tightened around the presentation remote. The plastic cracked. Backstage, Zoe saw the change in his posture. She opened the private channel. "Your right shoulder just locked." Silas forced his hand open. "Ventilation breach," he said quietly. Zoe's eyes moved to the building systems panel. "What kind?" "Pheromone?" The technician beside her blinked. "Did he say pheromone?" Zoe muted the room microphone. "How bad?" Silas's vision flashed gold. "Fatal to the broadcast." Zoe sat upright. That was the closest he ever came to admitting fear. She opened the auditorium's cloud observability interface and pulled live data from the environmental controls. Air intake looked normal. Temperature stable. Pressure stable. Chemical monitoring showed no alert. Someone had spoofed the sensor layer. "Continue talking," she said. Silas stepped toward the Aether node pedestal. The floor shifted beneath him. Not physically. His balance was failing. "The adaptive engine," he said, "can redistribute processing demands in real time." His voice remained steady, but sweat formed along his temples. Zoe saw it through the stage camera. Silas did not sweat under lights. He barely seemed human under ordinary physical strain. She opened raw ventilation logs and bypassed the polished dashboard. The monitoring API had been fed clean synthetic values, but the intake controllers were cycling at irregular intervals. 3 seconds open. 8 seconds closed. 3 seconds open. A delivery pattern. Zoe traced the command source. External maintenance tunnel. Unauthorized access token. The intruder was still connected. She locked the token. The system rejected her request. Someone had escalated privileges above venue administration. Zoe swore, softly. On stage, Silas felt the first bone shift. His left wrist cracked. The sound was small, but the lapel microphone captured it. He turned it into a gesture, extending his arm toward the holographic display. The audience saw confidence. Zoe saw his hand tremble. "Emergency ventilation shutdown," she told the venue operator. The operator shook his head. "We cannot stop airflow in a full auditorium. You can stop it voluntarily or explain why the CEO turned into a forest animal on a global stream." The operator stared at her. Zoe turned back to the console. "Silas, I need 2 minutes. I have 20 seconds. His jaw clenched. A fang pressed against his lower lip. The main camera zoomed closer. Zoe slammed the camera control away from the automated director and switched to a wide shot. "Do not give me close-ups," she ordered. "Lock all cameras wider than 20 meters. The broadcast director protested. "We are approaching the reveal." "We are approaching something." Silas reached the center of the stage. His spine arched. The wolf inside him was no longer rising. It was tearing its way out. The synthetic pheromone burned through his lungs and bloodstream, amplifying anger, territorial instinct, and violent impulse. Every sound in the auditorium became an assault. Every heartbeat became a challenge. Cassian Rourke remained visible near the balcony. Smiling, Silas wanted to cross the room and rip out his throat. He dropped the remote. It hit the floor and shattered. The audience murmured. Zoe's fingers flew over the controls. "Silas, kneel." "I do not kneel. You are about to fall. Make it look intentional." His right knee struck the stage. The impact cracked the illuminated floor. The audience gasped. Silas placed one hand against the ground, pretending to interact with the digital environment. Behind him, the simulated city pulsed. His shoulders expanded. The seams of his suit began to strain. Zoe saw reddish fur erupt above his collar. "Main feed delay? 4 seconds, the broadcast director said. "Regional buffers? Between 3 and 9. Give me every available cloud render node." The room went silent. A systems engineer turned toward her. "Every node? Every node? The product demonstration is using half the network. Then the product can demonstrate usefulness." She opened the live compositing stack. Silas's transformation accelerated. His bones cracked with the sound of branches breaking beneath ice. His hands widened into claws. Reddish fur spread across his neck and face. His shirt tore at the shoulders. The audience began rising from their seats. Some were screaming. Some were filming. Cassian's smile widened. On the global stream, 4 seconds of buffer remained between disaster and exposure. Zoe created a new visual layer. Not concealment. Replacement. Trying to reconstruct Silas as human in real time would fail. His shape was changing too rapidly, and the movement was too complex. Any attempt to preserve his human form would produce warping, clipping, or visual delay. So she abandoned reality. She opened the Keynote's dormant augmented reality assets and built a new one over him. A cybernetic wolf warrior. Armor first. Black metallic plating formed around Silas's expanding shoulders. Neon lines traced his spine. His claws became articulated energy blades. The reddish fur transformed into glowing synthetic fiber beneath layered armor. Zoe linked the overlay to his actual skeletal motion. Every violent movement fed the character. Every crack of bone became part of the animation. Every snarl drove the digital face. The render farm spiked to 93%. Warnings exploded across her dashboard. Frame latency climbed. 30 milliseconds. 42. 60. "Regional node 12 is dropping," a technician said. "Move eastern relays to node 14. Node 14 is handling audio." Split audio through the backup cluster. The backup cluster is cold. Wake it. On stage, Silas's body completed the shift. The man vanished. A massive reddish wolf stood where the CEO had fallen. He was nearly the size of a small vehicle, with a broad chest, brutal jaws, and glowing golden eyes. Torn fabric lay beneath his paws. The front rows screamed. Then the broadcast overlay activated across the auditorium projection system. Cybernetic armor wrapped the wolf. Neon energy surged along its limbs. A digital skyline erupted behind him. Music thundered through the speakers. The audience stopped screaming. The wolf raised its head and roared. Zoe fed the sound through a live effects chain, adding synthetic harmonics, sub-bass impact, and a rising mechanical resonance. The roar became the voice of a colossal game character emerging from another world. The auditorium lights flashed in perfect synchronization. The artificial city behind Silas shattered into floating data. The cybernetic wolf leaped onto the pedestal. The stage trembled. The audience erupted, not in fear, in delirious applause. Thousands of people surged to their feet, shouting and cheering as the enormous armored creature moved beneath the holographic skyline. Zoe opened a live graphics channel. Text appeared across the global feed. Aethernode real-time immersive rendering. No pre-rendered assets, no motion capture delay, powered live. The audience response doubled. Online engagement charts climbed so quickly that the scale had to redraw itself. Comments flooded the stream. Impossible. Best product reveal ever. That creature is live. How are they rendering this in real time? The broadcast director stared at the numbers. We just passed 20 million viewers. Zoe kept watching the frame rate. Do not celebrate yet. The wolf turned toward Cassian. Even beneath the AR armor, Zoe recognized Silas's intent. He was going to attack. She opened his private audio channel, uncertain whether the earpiece had survived. Silas. The wolf's ears twitched. Do not eat the man in the silver suit. His golden eyes shifted toward a stage camera. He sabotaged the ventilation, Zoe said. I have his access trail. We can ruin him later. The wolf growled. The armor translated it into a brilliant pulse of red energy. The crowd screamed with delight. Good effect, Zoe said. Now walk backstage before you turn the keynote into a crime scene. For 3 terrifying seconds, Silas remained fixed on Cassian. Then he turned. The AR system generated a dramatic digital gateway at the edge of the stage. Silas walked through it, disappearing behind the curtain as the holographic city collapsed into the Aethernode logo. The auditorium shook with applause. The market response panel refreshed. Veil Quantum Systems had gained billions in valuation within minutes. Pre-orders overloaded the commercial servers. The communications director sat down heavily. What just happened? Zoe took another sip of her energy drink. Product market alignment. Backstage, security teams sealed the corridor. Silas shifted into human form behind a black partition, every breath harsh and uneven. Sweat covered his skin. His suit was destroyed. Blood marked several places where the transformation had broken through too quickly. Garrick wrapped a heavy coat around his shoulders. We have Cassian's location. Do not touch him, Silas said. Garrick stared. Alpha? Zoe has his access trail. Silas pushed past him. He found her in the control room, seated exactly where she had been, watching frame rate graphs settle back toward normal. 20 technicians surrounded her in stunned silence. She looked small among the equipment. Calm. Pale blonde hair falling loose around her face. One hand on the console, the other holding a silver energy drink. Silas stopped in the doorway. A month earlier, he had believed she was a sorcerer because she could erase his beast from recorded footage. Tonight, she had done something more impossible. She had taken his worst nightmare and turned it into triumph. She had watched him collapse, shift, and lose everything in front of the world. Then she had rewritten the meaning of it before the world could understand what it saw. Zoe glanced at him. You owe me for emergency rendering. Silas stared. And overtime, she added. He crossed the room. The technicians moved aside without being asked. His bare feet were silent against the floor. The coat hung open over his powerful chest. His eyes still carried a faint ring of gold. Zoe turned back to the dashboard. Regional latency peaked at 84 milliseconds, which is unacceptable, but the audience probably interpreted the lag as cinematic wait. Silas placed one hand on the back of her chair. You saved me. I saved the broadcast. You saved my company. The product saved the company. I used its infrastructure. You saved my secret. That too. His fingers tightened around the chair. Zoe looked up at him. For once, Silas had no calculated response. No threat. No command. He felt the remaining rage in his blood dissolve beneath something fiercer. Awe. Possession. Devotion so sudden and complete that it terrified him more than exposure ever had. She was exhausted. He could see it in the faint shadows beneath her eyes and the slight tremor in the hand holding the drink. Yet she had not complained. She had not panicked. She had not asked whether his transformation was real. She had simply solved the impossible problem. Silas leaned closer. Zoe raised the can between them. You are dripping sweat near the console. He stopped. Then he laughed. The sound was low, rough, and so unfamiliar that every person in the room looked away. Zoe frowned. Are you experiencing another pheromone reaction? No. Then why are you smiling like that? Silas looked at her with fierce, possessive awe. Because I finally understand what you are. She lifted one eyebrow. A contractor with an unpaid emergency invoice? My salvation. Zoe stared at him. Then she turned back to the frame rate monitor. Your emotional processing has higher latency than the Eastern Relay. Silas's smile deepened. The stock price climbed again. Cassian Rourke fled the auditorium in humiliation. Millions of viewers replayed the greatest technology reveal in history. And in the dark control room behind the stage, the Alpha King realized with absolute certainty that the fearless human woman sipping an energy drink beside him had become the one thing he could never edit out of his life. And in the dark control room behind the stage, the Alpha King realized with absolute certainty that the fearless human woman sipping an energy drink beside him had become the one thing he could never edit out of his life. That realization should have brought him peace. Instead, it terrified him. For the next 12 days, Silas avoided Zoe with the precision of a man conducting a hostile corporate retreat. He attended every scheduled executive meeting. He approved her emergency rendering fees without negotiation. He granted her full access to the new broadcast infrastructure and authorized the independent security audit she had requested. He simply stopped appearing in person. Their conversations became brief, encrypted messages. Need status on regional live feed containment. Complete. Any remaining footage from the keynote removed from public relays. 3 private copies detected and neutralized. Payment sent. Received. Efficient. Professional. Empty. Zoe noticed by the second day. By the 5th, she had begun adding unnecessary technical comments to her reports, just to see whether he would respond. Node 7 continues to behave like an emotionally unavailable executive. Silas replied with a single word, replace it. Zoe stared at the message for nearly a minute. Then she typed, I was referring to you. No reply came. The public believed Silas was recovering from exhaustion after performing the most ambitious augmented reality demonstration in corporate history. Investors praised his commitment. Media analysts called the cybernetic wolf reveal visionary. Pre-orders for the Aether node continued climbing. Cassian Rourke's syndicate lost 3 major territories after Zoe traced the sabotage to his network. Silas dismantled his financial alliances with ruthless efficiency and left Cassian alive only because Zoe had advised against creating what she called unnecessary cleanup overhead. Everything had worked. The company was stronger. His secret was safe. Zoe remained under contract. Yet Silas spent each night alone in the private levels of his tower, replaying the keynote footage without the augmented overlay. He watched himself fall. He watched his bones distort. He watched the beast tear through his clothing and replace every trace of the polished human executive the world admired. Then he watched Zoe's filter appear. Metallic armor covered the fur. Neon energy transformed his claws. Synthetic effects made the monster beautiful, impressive, marketable. She had saved him by changing him. The thought lodged beneath his ribs. Zoe had first encountered his beast through corrupted video and called it an error. She had removed his eyes, his teeth, his fur, and his roar. At the keynote, she had hidden his real form beneath a cybernetic fantasy. Perhaps that was all she could accept. The corrected version, the controlled version, the version dressed in a tailored suit delivering perfect speeches through an artificial voice. Silas had spent his life mastering the art of appearing human. He understood that civilized surfaces were useful. A suit concealed muscle. A title concealed violence. Corporate language concealed conquest. But Zoe had reached beneath every surface and made him want something more dangerous than control. He wanted to be known. The desire felt humiliating. An alpha king could demand loyalty. He could purchase service, command obedience, and destroy anyone who threatened his secrets. He could not order a woman to look at the monster beneath those secrets and love him anyway. So, he remained distant. Zoe responded by becoming increasingly annoyed. On the 13th night, she sat alone in her studio, reviewing server logs beneath the cold light of her monitors. The repaired steel door now fitted perfectly inside the reinforced frame. Silas's construction team had installed a pressure seal, thermal insulation, biometric locks, and a security system strong enough to defend a military archive. Zoe had made them reposition the ventilation sensor twice. Rain tapped against the high windows. Her render farm hummed beyond the glass partition. On the central monitor, a cloud observability dashboard displayed stable temperatures across every region. The system required no intervention. Zoe refreshed it anyway. Then she checked her messages. Nothing from Silas. She opened their retainer agreement and reread the availability clause. The contract required her to remain accessible. It did not require him to behave like a malfunctioning ghost. Zoe opened a new message. Your executive communication endpoint has failed health checks for 12 consecutive days. She did not send it. Instead, she deleted the sentence, leaned back, and pressed both hands over her face. This was absurd. Silas was a client, a deeply strange, physically intimidating, secretly lupine client who had kicked down her door, threatened her life, given her a distributed rendering network, and looked at her after the keynote as though she had personally rebuilt his heart. Then, he had disappeared. Zoe lowered her hands. A warning appeared on the security monitor. Exterior lock disengaged. She straightened. No access request had been submitted. The door opened. Silas stood in the entrance. He wore no suit, no polished shoes, no dark coat, no expensive watch. He wore black pants and a plain shirt stretched over his broad chest. His dark red hair was damp from the rain. Exhaustion sharpened the planes of his face. Zoe looked at him. You are aware that people normally message before accessing a private workspace. Yes, then your problem is not knowledge. No. Is there another broadcast emergency? No. She waited. Silas stepped inside and closed the door carefully behind him. The thermal seal engaged with a soft hiss. Zoe glanced at it. At least you have learned airflow management. His mouth almost moved. Almost. Then his expression hardened again. Turn off the recording systems. There are no recording systems running. Confirm it. Zoe checked the dashboard. Confirmed. Disable the external relays. She studied him. Something was wrong. Silas did not look angry. Anger made him larger, sharper, more controlled. Tonight, he looked uncertain. It was the most unnatural expression she had ever seen on him. Zoe shut down the external relays. Done. Silas remained near the door. His hands opened and closed at his sides. I have concealed my nature for most of my life, he said. Not because I am ashamed of power, but because humans destroy what they cannot categorize. Zoe turned her chair toward him. I categorize unusual things constantly. You categorize them as errors. The words were quiet. She frowned. Silas looked toward the monitor where the cybernetic wolf footage remained archived inside an encrypted project folder. You have only ever protected the human version of me. I protected your secret. You removed the beast. Because that was the job. You made me acceptable. I made you broadcast safe. You covered what I am with armor and light. Zoe's hands went still. At last, she understood. Silas had interpreted every edit as rejection. Every restored frame had become proof that she preferred the mask. He had mistaken technical concealment for disgust. Before she could answer, he pulled off his shirt. Zoe's breath caught. Not because she had never seen his body. She had seen portions of it during the keynote aftermath. But there was something different about the way he stood now. No threat. No performance. No attempt to dominate the room. He exposed every scar across his chest and shoulders, including a long silvered mark above his heart that no tailored suit revealed. "This is not a demonstration," he said. Gold entered his eyes. His spine arched. The first crack of bone echoed through the studio. Zoe rose. Silas's shoulders expanded violently. Muscle shifted beneath his skin. His hands struck the floor as fingers lengthened into claws. Reddish fur surged across his arms, chest, and jaw. The transformation was nothing like the corrupted board meeting footage. It was larger, more brutal, more honest. His clothes tore as his body grew. His face extended into a massive muzzle, lined with lethal teeth. The studio seemed to shrink around him until the creature standing before Zoe filled the open floor. A wolf larger than any natural animal lowered its head beneath the ceiling lights. Thick red fur covered its powerful frame. Darker strands ran along its spine. Golden eyes burned above a broad muzzle. Its claws pressed into the concrete, each one capable of opening steel. The air changed around him. Predatory energy rolled through the studio. Servers hummed. Cooling fans turned. Rain struck the windows. Silas looked at Zoe. He did not growl. He did not advance like a king expecting submission. He approached slowly, one heavy paw at a time. Zoe remained beside her chair. Silas reached the desk. Then the most feared alpha in Neoncrest City lowered himself to the floor. His enormous head settled beside her keyboard. One golden eye remained visible above the edge of the desk. He waited. The posture was terrifying in its vulnerability. This creature had commanded syndicates, broken reinforced doors, destroyed enemies, ruled hidden territories through fear and blood. Now he rested his head beside her hand and waited for her to recoil. Zoe's throat tightened. Silas had not come to frighten her. He had come to prove his worst fear correct. She looked at the thick, reddish fur surrounding his face. It moved with each breath. Several loose strands clung to the keyboard. The shedding was realistic. Zoe sat slowly. Silas's ear twitched. She placed her fingers on the keyboard. His visible eye dimmed. He believed she was returning to work. Believed she could not even look at him without needing a screen between them. Zoe closed the cloud dashboard. Then the broadcast controls. Then the rendering interface. One by one, she shut every program. The monitors went black. The studio fell into darkness except for the amber maintenance lights along the floor. Silas lifted his head slightly. Zoe turned off the final screen. "No filters," she said. His breathing stopped. She reached toward him. Silas remained completely still as her hand entered the thick fur above his eye. The texture surprised her, coarse at the surface. Softer, beneath, warm, alive. Her fingers moved slowly through the reddish strands, following the direction of growth along his enormous brow. Silas released a breath that shook the desk. Zoe used both hands. She stroked the fur along his cheek, then behind one pointed ear. His eye closed. The lethal alpha energy surrounding him changed. It softened, not vanished. Never harmless, but no longer aimed at protecting a wound. "You were right about one thing," Zoe said. His eye opened. "The resolution on reality is a little messy." A low sound rolled through his chest. Zoe smiled. "There is inconsistent density around the jaw. The lighting response is unpredictable. Your edges are impossible to isolate, and you are shedding directly into my keyboard." Silas began to pull away. Zoe caught a fistful of fur. "But I prefer the raw footage." He froze. She moved closer, pressing her forehead against the side of his massive muzzle. "The polished CEO is impressive," she whispered. "The cybernetic wolf was excellent for market positioning. But this is you." Silas's golden eye searched her face. "No corrections," Zoe continued. "No reconstruction. No voice replacement. No cleanup. Her fingers tightened gently in his fur. No filters required. The wolf closed his eyes. A tremor passed through his entire body. Then his form shifted. The enormous frame contracted. Fur withdrew. Claws became hands. The massive head beneath Zoe's palms reshaped into a human face. Silas knelt beside her chair, naked from the waist up, breathing as though he had survived a war. Zoe's hands remained against his cheeks. His gold-ringed eyes were wet. No one had ever seen the Alpha King cry. Zoe said nothing about it. Silas gripped her waist and pulled her from the chair. She landed against his chest. His mouth found hers. The kiss was not polished. It was desperate, deep, and almost unbearably tender beneath its force. Silas held her as though she were the only fixed point in a collapsing world. Zoe wrapped her arms around his neck. His control broke. He lifted her onto the edge of the desk, scattering loose cables and one empty energy drink can. His hands moved over her back, possessive but careful, as if he could not decide whether to claim her or worship her. "Mine," he said against her mouth. Zoe drew back just enough to breathe. "That sounds like an ownership clause." His gaze burned. "It is a declaration. Declarations require defined terms. You are mine. Mutual obligations? All that I possess is yours. Termination conditions? None. Duration? Lifetime." Zoe's lips curved. "Binding? Absolutely." Silas kissed her again. This time, the wolf was present in the kiss. Not hidden, not corrected. A fierce warmth moved through him as he drew her closer, and Zoe accepted every part of it. When his mouth moved to her neck, he paused. The sharp edge of a fang touched her skin. "So?" She understood the question beneath her name. No software could reverse this decision. No edit could restore the previous version. She placed one hand behind his head. "Execute the contract." Silas bit gently. Heat flashed through her. The bond opened between them like a new system coming online, vast and immediate. She felt his fear, his awe, his devotion, and the fierce territorial certainty of the wolf. Silas felt her answer. Acceptance, affection, trust. And beneath all of it, the steady, practical certainty that she had examined every layer of him and found nothing she wanted removed. He held her until their breathing slowed. Hours later, they sat on the studio floor beside the repaired steel door. Silas wore his torn shirt loosely around his shoulders. Zoe leaned against his chest with a laptop balanced across her knees. A document filled the screen. Lifetime exclusive partnership agreement. Silas read the clauses. Mutual protection. Shared infrastructure. Full disclosure of supernatural emergencies. No destruction of climate-controlled entrances. Mandatory communication during emotional withdrawal incidents. Unlimited physical affection upon reasonable request. Silas pointed to the final clause. Reasonable request? Zoe edited it. Unlimited physical affection. He nodded. They signed electronically. Then Silas pressed his thumb against the screen. A faint golden mark appeared beside his name. Zoe looked at it. Was that necessary? It is binding. Alpha law. You could have mentioned supernatural signature protocols before I selected the standard template. You enjoy revisions. Not after final delivery. He kissed her temple. Months later, Vele Quantum Systems opened a private broadcast division beneath Zoe's control. The official announcement described her as Chief Reality Architect. Zoe had called the title ridiculous. Silas had refused to change it. She built a live concealment network capable of identifying supernatural exposure before human viewers noticed it. Werewolf syndicates paid enormous fees for her protection. Vampires hired her to correct reflections. Shapeshifters requested emergency facial stabilization. One ancient sea creature required extensive color grading. Zoe accepted only the interesting projects. Silas continued ruling Neoncrest City from the top of his corporate empire. But he no longer slept alone in the tower. Most nights, he returned to the studio, sometimes in a suit, sometimes in his massive reddish wolf form. When the world became too loud, he rested his head beside Zoe's keyboard. She complained about the fur. Then she stroked it until he slept. The public continued to admire the polished human CEO. The hidden world feared the Alpha King. Zoe loved both. She understood better than anyone that perfection was usually a constructed image. Every flawless frame concealed noise, broken edges, unstable light, and countless corrections. Love was different. Love did not demand cleaner footage. It did not remove the frightening parts or replace the unacceptable sounds. It watched the unedited truth. Then it stayed. If you enjoyed this steamy, hilarious, and thrilling paranormal romance audiobook, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic stories.